Hey everyone, this is Kane with Centrify. I'm the Professional Services Director for Centrify Corporation. Welcome to our Centrify Insider Hangout on Air. With me today are our guests Jake Hall and Nick Gamb. Nick's our developer advocate for Centrify, and Jake is on our professional services team for doing consulting around our platform and SaaS platform. Jake, you want to say a moment and say hello?
Greetings, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jake Hall. I'm a professional services consultant for the CIS platform, and I'm glad to be on board.
Thank you. And Nick, you want to take a moment and say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nick Gamb, as Kane said, developer advocate with Centrify. I'm trying to teach everyone about the programmatic abilities within Centrify and how to use our APIs in our platform.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, and if you've never been to a Google Hangout on Air, I'm just going to do a real quick introduction to how you can ask questions, because the point of this is that you can ask questions. So I'm going to quickly share my screen here and bear with me for a second and present to everybody. Yeah. Hey, look at that. All right. So if you've never been to a Google Hangout on Air, there's a Q&A app. Right now you can see the upper right side of your screen. When you press that button there, that little 3x3 grid, there'll be an option for either Showcase or Q&A. What you want to select is you want to select Q&A. When you go to Q&A, there'll be a button down in the bottom right that says Ask a Question, ask a new question. So when you press that button, you can then ask questions. I'll be moderating this, and so during the course of this, if you've got a question in this presentation, you can just ask questions. We'll pick them as we go along. And with that, I wanted to say, Nick, yesterday I was talking to a client, and it's a pretty interesting story here. They were asking about programming and whether or not our current Centrify platform was extensible, if we had any external APIs, or if they could do REST calls, or if they could do SAML, and they were really curious about that. And I figured, I hope that they watched today's broadcast. Can you tell us a little bit about the programmability of the Centrify platform?
Sure. So the Centrify Identity Service...
Oh, hang on. The wrong button. Nick, start over. There we go. That's better. Nick, you are muted, unfortunately.
Okay, there we go. Is
You're
that,
on.
is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
Don't press that button.
Yeah. So the Centrify product, Centrify Identity Service, and Centrify Privilege Service, all of the magic for those products happen within our platform. So they make calls to our platform from the client, the user interface. And the platform is actually what does all of the work that you see when you use our products. So all of those API calls and those platform calls are possible or are open to be used by any of our customers who would like to, for example, integrate Centrify's products or Centrify's features rather into their own website or something similar.
Okay, can you tell us just a little more about the API? We actually had a viewer question that came up earlier this morning when we were going live, just about what an API is and the purpose of it.
Sure, and I was going to go into this, in a little bit, but if we can, I need to know how to share my screen again here. I'm new to this Hangout thing, so I'm going to go ahead and try to share
on the left, it's the green button.
Right on the left. Yeah, I heard that already. Okay, so you guys should hopefully be able to see, just a little PowerPoint presentation.
Hey, there you go. All right.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
Screen. Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to skip some of my slides here, and I'm just going to skip down to just a couple of examples here. This is an example of what you could do with a API call. This is one simple API call that is being done from within a SharePoint environment, and SharePoint is reaching out with the username to Centrify's platform and getting all the single sign-on apps that this specific user is allowed to access and presenting it to them in a web part. So it's just coded in C#, and it just makes a simple web call. And you can use these web calls for many different things. I mean, the ability is kind of endless as far as what you could do, with scripting and with APIs. But a few examples would be, bring your own user interface, which is what we see here with the SharePoint example. Custom login screens, if you don't want to use the Centrify login screen, or you want to integrate Centrify's login features into a a separate login page or your own custom login page, and even custom products. If you're making your own product and you want to add multi-factor authentication, or you need some type of a credential store or identity services, you can integrate Centrify into your product itself, and actually integrate those features. So that's just kind of a couple of examples of what you could do with an integration. This is an example diagram here that just kind of shows what an API call, how it kind of works from start to finish. This is a man-in-the-middle type of approach where you're...
Nick, can you make that full screen? Just blow it up a little bit.
Let's see if it breaks everything. Well, that gave me the wrong... it gave you the wrong view here. You need to see the other view.
You can switch it to non-presenter view.
You know where that is, Kane?
This is what, PowerPoint 2007?
13.
2013? Okay. Yeah, skip it. Just go back, hit escape.
How's that?
Oh, that's awesome.
You just gotta play with it a little bit.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that bigger?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Apologize for that. So this is an example of a man-in-the-middle type of approach where your client or user interface, which is represented right down here at the bottom of the flow, makes calls to your own web application server. So an example of this is your ASP.NET type code then calls your C# code behind or something like that. And at that point, your server is what talks to the Centrify Cloud Platform. So in this example, a user will click on something, and it will make the on button click call to your web server. Your server sees that the user has clicked on this button, determines it needs a certain type of information to present back to the user, makes a REST API call to Centrify, to the Centrify Cloud Platform. The Centrify Cloud Platform returns the data back to your server, which then takes that data and formats it to be all pretty and puts it up on the screen back for the user on the client to be able to see and then potentially click another button, etc. And so this is sort of a one approach of how an API call is structured and what it would do. Another example, just for curiosity's sake, just in case you're curious, you could code using JavaScript or Ajax or something like that directly into the client and have your client make direct calls to the platform and then return that information. Both approaches are perfectly acceptable. Both approaches have pros and cons to each one of them. So it's really kind of up to, that's kind of out of the scope of this conversation, but it's kind of up to how you want to design your website and what you're trying to do with it, etc.
Sure, and just as a dumb question now, this is all just port 443 and port 80, right? There's no magical stuff required to talk to the Centrify Cloud.
That all depends on how your firewall is set up and how your website is designed. So that's not something necessarily that is restricted by Centrify. You can do it however you want. The requirement is that whatever is calling the platform has to be able to make a HTTP or HTTPS web request to the cloud platform. And then the request has to be able to obviously return a response. And it's just a standard web call. Typically when you make a web call, a response is returned. So as long as your site is set up to be able to reach out of your corporate firewall and your that security is set up so that the communication can happen via a request and a response in an HTTP web call, you should be good to go. So 443 and 80 would be a good example, Kane. Yes, that could work.
Okay.
If that's how you set it up to work.
Sure. So what's it like to develop against our platform?
It's relatively easy. You're asking me all the questions that I was going to cover later.
Well, how about you just cover it now? Why not?
I will. So it's relatively easy. Here's a really quick example that I just threw together. The same example that we saw where you had the applications all listed out inside of SharePoint. Basically, you have an endpoint URL that you need to send your HTTP web call to. And then you have the request JSON, which is what force::true is here. This is JSON that is required for the request. And then you get a response back. And I didn't post the full response here because it's massive for this call because I have lots of apps that it could be returning. But this is just an example in C#. this is actually a bit of a complex example because I'm obviously doing things like handling cookies in cookie containers and doing a bit of error checking, etc. This could actually be much less code if you really wanted it to be, but I actually find that this interface here that I've created is very reusable. I actually reuse it in all of my code, and it makes literally every single Centrify REST call. So you throw it in a class, and all you have to do really at that point with working with our platform APIs is you just put in an endpoint URL, you put in some request JSON, and you plan to receive some return JSON. Now, if we look at the next slide I have here, this is just kind of an example. If you look at this, the SharePoint example we were looking at, and if we look at this Fiddler Trace, which I know it's kind of small, so I'm going to bring up the actual Fiddler Trace here.
Thank you.
You can
still
see.
Pretty small, though.
Yeah, I can try to zoom in. Does that better?
Oh, hey, that's improving.
Much better.
Okay. So you can see from this Fiddler Trace that I'm posting to this endpoint URL, and you can ignore the anti-XSS stuff here. That does not need to be in the call. That is automatically appended depending on how it's being called. This is something that our internal product uses, but you don't necessarily need to use. So really, you're just making an API call to what is highlighted currently. At that point, that's your endpoint URL. You need to send over some JSON, so you can see down here that I'm sending force true. There's another option for get up data. We could also send a username, so we have username and then an email address or something like that. So there are a few options in what you can send in the JSON in order to return what you want it to return. If we look at the JSON view here, you can see it, it's kind of in JSON a little bit better.
Kind of smallish again.
Oh, sorry. I can't zoom that one either. Sorry. So we'll go back to the raw view here, and I'll just keep it zoomed in.
Okay.
You can see here down in this bottom window that this is what response you would get returned. Specifically, you're going to get this highlighted JSON here. Now, I know it's kind of, I can scroll through it. You're not going to be able to see everything just because it's a really long string of information. But I'll flip over to this JSON view. I know it's kind of small, but hopefully you can kind of get the gist that this actually returns all of this data, one for each application that you have, and then you're able to have information like the application key, which can be used to build a single sign-on URL. You can get things like icon URLs to be able to place the icon on the screen. So there are many different things that are returned for each application, and really at that point, once you get this response, you do something with it. So you get your response back from Centrify, and you parse it out using a JSON parser. In C# I use Newtonsoft a lot, but you can also use like a JavaScript parser.
Sure.
And then at that point, you do stuff with your data. So you now have a dictionary full of data, and you can iterate through it and present it to your user in whatever way you think looks best.
Cool. Now, obviously, that endpoint URL there, you've got that kibble.centrify.com. That's
Sure.
an internal URL. The client would have their own URL that they'd post to, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's very rare situations where our customers actually use Kibble. There's a few preview type situations where they're previewing a feature or something like that. Yeah, this is Kibble because that's where my internal development environment is. But in the case of most customer tenants, they're going to be in cloud.centrify.com.
Okay, cool. What else can you show us about developing against this platform? I know that we were going to go to, I know that Jake's also got a live demo he's itching to go with, but I want to make sure everybody kind of gets it for what we're talking about here.
Well, let's take a look at something more advanced. This is a very advanced flowchart.
Dude, no kidding. Wow.
It's very fun, right? So this is the same thing we talked about before, where we have a user interface where the client is, or the user is in front of their screen, basically. We have a server, which is kind of that C# code behind that does things, and it calls the Centrify Cloud Platform. So this is an example of multi-factor authentication, and the reason this is so advanced is this is supporting every single multi-factor authentication feature that Centrify actually has to offer. You can make this much more simplified if you wanted to only support, email or just text message. But if you want to keep it dynamic and support everything that Centrify has to offer, this is kind of, sort of an advanced situation that, takes a lot of calls. So I'm going to just go ahead and run through it real fast if you want, real quick.
Please.
We have a username and text box that we typically, or username text box that we normally would present to the user. So they type in their email address, something like that, and they click a submit button. Now, because I've zoomed this way in, for some reason it's cut some of my letters off here, so I apologize for that. But we have a text box and a submit button. So they type in their email address, they click submit. This represents the click of submit, and then at that point we're in the server code. The server code says, okay, we have a new user. We would like to start authentication for this user. We need to do that through the Centrify Cloud Platform. So it takes the username and it makes a call to the Start Authentication API, which is kind of how you start a multi-factor authentication within Centrify. It passes that username, and Centrify's Cloud Platform takes that username and returns, so that's what this red line here is, it returns a list of mechanisms with mechanism IDs. Now, these mechanisms are actually multi-factor mechanisms, so email, text message, phone call, secret question, mobile app, those are all mechanisms. So it sends a list of mechanisms that this user is set up for and that this user is allowed to use to authenticate. So that's based on your security policy.
Just a question here, just for sake of clarity. That site UI, that's what's presented at the user interface layer. That site server, that's the customer's server. That's not something Centrify. That could be the customer's web server, and that red one, that's our cloud, right?
Yeah. And as I described before, the UI is the client, so that's your user's actual computer. The server is the like and a good example is in ASP.NET, you have your ASP.NET code, so it's HTML basically, and then you have your C# code behind that actually handles what happens when you click a button, or handles what happens, or how a drop-down is populated, etc. So the server is that code that handles what happens when you click a button, basically. If you were going to do this in client directly to platform, you could have HTML that has a whole bunch of JavaScript that handles all of this site server code. However, I find that that's a little bit complex for something like this. However, it's 100% supported.
Sure.
Okay. So once the server has the list of multi-factor mechanisms that the current user is allowed to work with, it takes this list of mechanisms and it actually puts it into the UI via a drop-down box. So it creates a drop-down box in the user interface for the user to select the mechanism and select how they'd like to proceed with their authentication. There's two types, really. Well, there's pretty much two types of mechanisms that could be returned. One is text, where it's kind of like password. You just enter some text and press submit, and it just submits that answer to the Centrify Cloud Platform. And then there's polling, where it has to sit there and poll for a period of time, for example, waiting for the user to get an email and for the user to click a link in that email. So it has to poll and wait for that email link to come through and show that has been completed. So that's what this little split here is down here, where it's determining if we're polling or if we're doing text. So text and then polling. If it's a text answer, we simply just do a submit, and we we basically submit the mechanism ID and then the answer with that text back to the Centrify Cloud Platform. If it's polling, we're going to put up a logo or like a loading screen type of, a spinny wheel or some type of thing that says we're doing something, basically. And we submit the polling answer rather than text answer to our server, which then submits that to the Centrify Cloud Platform. So we have to tell the Centrify Cloud Platform via our server whether it's text and has an answer included, or whether it's polling and whether we should start polling and start that whole email process, etc.
Okay.
So once we're in the platform here, the platform determines what we sent over. If it's just a text answer, so in other words, if we submitted text password, for example, and that was successful, we could immediately get an authentication success return, which in that case, we'll go through and notify the user of a successful login and redirect them to wherever they're supposed to go. In the case of polling, we will keep polling until the user completes what they're supposed to complete. So text message, for example, or email address. So in that case, we're going to be back here on our server. We're going to see that the responses keep polling, and we're just going to keep doing this circle over and over and over again until we get returned a success call. At that point, we can. Oops, I apologize. It looks like I advanced my slides there. Anyways, yeah. So in other words, if he says keep polling, we're going to keep polling until we get successful authentication. At that point, we're going to put them back into the successful authentication section where we're redirecting them somewhere. The other thing that could happen is we could get success, but we could also get new package. An example of this is their password is expired, and we need to start doing something for them to be able to reset their password.
Oh, okay.
So in that case, we're going to come back to our server. We're going to see that that it's successful, but we need to basically handle a new package of multi-factor authentication mechanisms. And so we redirect them down this pipeline over here back to the very start of our flowchart. And we basically start pretty much all over again with a list of mechanism IDs where we have to present them to the user, and the user has to do something, to tell us how they want to handle that situation. So there's a lot more advanced. There's a lot more steps to it, but this is probably the most advanced concept in our platform APIs, and it's handling authentication.
And this way, really, if a client had a web app and they wanted to deploy multi-factor authentication, this is how they could do that, right?
Absolutely, yes. They can anything that our user interface does in the product, for the most part, you can put into your own user interface via, be it a website that you've created or a application that you've created.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Nick, do you have anything else you want to share with us, or do we want to go to the live demo with Jake?
I would just say before you're about to see a demo of what I currently have on my screen actually integrated into a website that we've created, and you're also going to see a demo of the integrating the app screen that I showed earlier as well. So I kind of gave you a preview of what you're going to be seeing when Jake shows this demo. Keep this diagram here in mind that I have up on my screen when you see Jake do the authentication. And keep in mind too this process flow here, because this is the design flow that was used in creating this demo. So it has an ASP.NET front end, a C# code behind, and then it's calling the Centrify platforms. And just keep in mind this piece here too, where it's just a simple HTTPS web call with a JSON request payload and a JSON response. And so I have up here on my screen Fiddler once again, where you can see we're making a start authentication API call at this point. I'm passing my username and bits of other information in the JSON, and I'm getting returned a list of mechanisms and challenges, as you can see in the screenshot. So just keep that stuff in mind when you see everything that Jake does. Really, it's just three simple things: endpoint, request, and response.
Cool. All right. And one other thing I'll say as I switch the camera here to Jake is that if you have questions, if you're out there, you're watching this, you're wondering, hey, how do I do this? Or, we want to get more details about this, ask. That's what this is for. This is we're hoping for this to be pretty interactive, so please ask your questions. And Jake, you're on. We can see your screen.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Nick. So what we have here is our API demo. I'm going to go ahead here and click on Log On and Log In. And what this is a customized user interface. I'll just go ahead and log in to my own Centrify tenant here. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Okay. At this point, I'm going to be presented to the username and password authentication, much like if you logged into your own company Centrify tenant. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and sign on using my own credentials. I am also I have the ability to prompt myself for either password or an SMS text message.
Oh, okay, cool.
I also have the forgot password link. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and click login. Okay, now I am logged in, and I'm going to go ahead and click on apps here, and you can see the list of applications that I am now allowed to access, even though I'm on my own personal portal on my own website.
Cool. So that's not the Centrify portal there. That
is not the Centrify portal. Now, what we're looking at here is my own personal portal. But through this user interface, through this portal, I am able to access all of the administrative functionality that I would if I were logged into the actual tenant URL. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't say all of it. I haven't quite added all of the functionality, but the point is that you can actually access a large amount of it.
But we do have some administrative functionality here, right? We have the ability to go in and create users and indicate their passwords, right? So I can go in here and say, what's a good username?
Kane, let's put me in there. No? I can't have access? I was hoping to have access to your Amazon account.
So I'm going to go ahead and hit hello world at Jake.Hall. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create that user. Okay. Okay. And if I go back to my tenant here, I'm going to see hello world at Jake.Hall pop up.
You might need to zoom that in a bit or make that window, it's hard to read.
The third one from the top.
Yep, there you are.
There we are. You can see that they are an invited user, and they're part of the cloud user. Their display name is automatically hello world. But I can do a little bit more here. I can modify a user. I can change their attributes. I can go and find a user and change their attributes. I can lock their account, and I can verify if their account is enabled or not. I can also go in here and create a role. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Kane role.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm also going to add that user to a role inside of Centrify. Okay. And
there's the role. I see.
And there's my role.
Okay.
That user is now part of that role.
So just as a question that comes to mind, obviously I'm seeing the user interface here that you ginned up, but you wouldn't need to have a user interface on this. You could probably automate everything here. So if you had to bulk load 1,000 users, it would be possible to do that just using the REST API as opposed to manually pointing and clicking.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
A good example of that, too, is a lot of people like to use PowerShell or PowerScript. And you can completely script all this stuff using PowerScript or VBS script or JavaScript or anything that can make a web call can make an API call.
Okay. Jake, is there anything else you want to show?
Nick, I have a question for you. Do we have the ability to pull out custom reports using Centrify REST API?
Yeah, so our APIs have an interface we call Redrock. And Redrock is actually a SQL interface, so you can send SQL queries to any number of tables that you have access to, and you can pull. You can do some pretty advanced SQL queries to pull whatever information you find interesting. A good example of that usage too is, let's say you would like to have your script detect certain things in your custom report, and then you would like it to email certain bits of information, to your email address. You can do all that in a PowerShell script. You can have it call the Centrify SQL query or the Redrock interface and do a SQL query. You can have it return that information, see if that information has what you're looking for in it, and then email it to yourself or to somebody else if it does have that information.
Fantastic.
Very cool. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. We do not have any new questions from the audience, but I will mention, hey, if you've got a question, just put it in the Q&A app. Jake, is there anything else you wanted to show in the demo environment?
No, I think that's about it, Kane. It's actually a very simple, easy to use interface here. So thank you.
Okay. Nick, you got anything else?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would mention is, if all these things are possible, by you. If you would like any assistance, you can reach out, through professional services, or there is a specific email address, devsupport@centrify.com, to get help with the API specific items. If you'd actually like us to, our professional services team to actually, code a solution for you or design or develop a solution for you, Kane can and the professional services team rather can help with that as well.
Okay, well, thank you for the promotion there. I appreciate that. But that is cool. That devsupport@centrify.com. I was trying to remember if that was a publicly available email address, and now that it's on YouTube, it totally is. So that's cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we will shut it down. So, Nick, Jake, thanks so much for joining us on our first episode of Centrify Insider. Thanks to the viewers who popped on and off throughout the episode. And this will be left up on YouTube, on the Centrify Insider channel, as well as on the main Centrify channel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ken.
Jim.